it just seems that AI is now available to anyone who wants to use it. That's the case?
A lot of AI is speech recognition, translation, understanding images, understanding audio, interpreting language. Many of those are available as services in the cloud now. And two things have happened, maybe three. First of all, the cloud has democratized AI because there's an API you can call, a software developer can call into a cloud service. And you can call into it from a mobile phone. The mobile phones have democratized access to that, right? So the mobile phones have cameras, have speech recognition. All of these things are, mics, all of those are readily available. So there is this infrastructure that came about that connects a mobile phone and all the way to the cloud computing power. Then the second thing that happened was vast amounts of data are available. So there's lots of speech data. There's lots of image data now. In the past, 10, 20 years ago, this wasn't happening, right? Now there's lots of data. So developers of speech recognition systems can build these very powerful speech recognition systems. Same way there's lots of digital text, where both English and another language, right? So there's parallel text.
So the training gets easy.
Yeah. And so the vast amounts of data accumulating, the cloud, the mobile phone, all these three things coming together, that's just unleashed the power of AI.
It seems these days everyone is using AI in their products. And I wonder what your opinion of that is, whether most of it is a load of tosh, is a marketing exercise. It uses AI, but does it really?
Yeah. So look, AI itself, I'm not a big fan of that word. I am more of a fan of the word machine learning, which is more precise. It's about software technology that learns from data and learns to take actions just by seeing lots of historical data. That's a lot simpler than this magic of artificial general intelligence that stories and science fiction movies are written about. But nevertheless, machine learning is very useful. AI is very useful. And it has just become software technology. Now, AI is the new normal, really, because whenever you touch a mobile phone, you're actually touching AI in one way or the other, machine learning, really. Whether it be for assistants that you have, recommendation algorithms, ad targeting, search results. Microsoft's Bing search, for example, ranks every search result based on AI/neural networks. So it's just become software. And in a few years, we won't think of it as something that's separate. In fact, there's a famous saying, right? Great technology sort of disappears into the background.
It becomes invisible.
It becomes invisible,
yeah.
Right? Mark Weiser said that. And just like we, every day, we don't see electricity, we don't see the internal combustion engine, we don't see any of the magical technology that powers our life. Same way, software will just absorb AI as software. A lot of AI will be just like calling functions. Right?
It certainly seems to me that in the last 12, 18 months, I've got this impression that almost instead of programming a system to do a thing, you just invoke machine learning to learn how to do the thing and kind of sit back and let it happen. Is that what's going on? A lot of things these days, you just let an AI loose on it and it kind of teaches itself and you don't have to worry about how to program it.
That's a promise that a lot of researchers are working towards. It's not real. It's not yet possible to do that in generality.
But, we talk about, say, self-driving cars. What we do is we use artificial intelligence so it can learn for itself what a human looks like or what to do in certain situations. Speech recognition uses machine learning techniques. It's not fed particular data sets. Human programmers don't decide what words it needs to know about and what priority to give them when it's guessing a word. We let the machine learning work it out. It's almost like we're kind of letting the machine now do it, maybe because it does it better than human programmers.
Yeah, for certain tasks. So there is this thing called software 2.0, which is that promise that you talked about, which is for a lot of tasks, instead of you actually explicitly writing the programmatic instructions, you set up a teaching environment. So you take AI to school, so to speak. You set the teaching environment up. And then the system learns from that data, learns to drive a car without hitting humans, without putting people in danger, or fly a drone to inspect power lines, okay, or help you in various tasks. Now, there are lots of very sophisticated people behind the scenes setting that up and testing it, debugging it. It is now means anywhere as easy as it comes out to be.
But it's a different skill, isn't it, from trying to program a computer to cope with a certain situation. You program it to learn.
It's best in complement with programs, right? Software programs can do a certain set of limited things. This one complements that, and they both together become more powerful.
I've noticed another theme in the last year or two when we've looked at things that involve AI, and that is a kind of recognition about the limitations of artificial intelligence. And we've seen things where the developers have said, we're going to actually hand this bit over to humans. We've seen a robot cheetah at MIT, which can walk using AI and balance using AI, but when it comes to its arms, it just hands that back to a human teleoperator.
Correct. Yeah.
We've seen a system to cope with offensive emails.
Right.
They're not using AI to try and work out what's offensive. They're using a group of your friends to do it because they know more about you.
Exactly.
Do you think that's one of the trends at the moment, is to recognize the limits of AI and just say, no, at the moment we're going to give that back to the humans?
Completely. I mean, it's called assistive intelligence, right? AI is most powerful when it's augmenting humans. And what we are enabling with the power of all our devices, whether it be mobile phones, IoT, the cloud, algorithms, is enabling humans to be far more empowered in every action. And it's actually not that different from any technology. Your mobile phone empowers you in so many ways, right? And so AI is another software technology that adds to that, layers on top of it, and then extends the human reach, so to speak. And so I think that's a positive way we should think about every type of technology. It extends the reach of human beings as a civilization to do things they could never do before, create more economic opportunity, create more dynamism in the economy. And like, economists, if you think about it, they have, I mean, one of the things I learned early on in economy was the production possibility curve, the frontier, okay? So this is, as technology, within a certain limited technology, there's only so much production possible. When the technology advances, that curve moves outward, creating far more opportunities for production and creation and economic activity. And that's the magic for me for AI.
Just to go back to the training data before I forget, there seems to be a lot of concern at the moment that if you train a computer by giving it lots of data, there might be bias in the training data. These nightmare scenarios where a self-driving car won't recognize a person who's not an able-bodied, white-skinned person. How do we get around that? How do we make sure that these computers know everything? And how do we give them a complete training data set?
Well, I think the most important thing, by the way, is to have a very good testing program. Right? I mean, it's like software again. Anything that is controlled by software, whether it has AI in it or not, if that software has bugs in it, it's going to be causing unnecessary effects, right? So you have to debug it. Same way, you have to debug AI. And bias in data is something well known in statistics for a long time. There are rigorous statistical methods to test various things. So even think about medicine, for example. I mean, reality is, most of the time, you don't know exactly how a medicine works in the body of each individual. Right? Our bodies are very complex systems. And so what did medicine come up with? They had rigorous statistical controlled testing. So controlled testing is a way to get confidence in whatever intelligence that you're deploying so that we know it works in the right way, and the sample with which it is tested is developed in the right way so that it's controlled.
Do you think that companies do enough of that training before they release a product? Because it seems to me the best training set is the world's population, but then you get problems where Google, the Google search engine, incorrectly labels photos of black people, and you get, I think Microsoft had a Twitter bot that started to be trained by malicious people to behave very badly online. So do you think that companies should actually do all their debugging and training before this thing is released?
I think it's like the earlier days of software and any type of technology. I think there are bugs along the way, but we improve our development systems, our software testing systems,
But
and
do
so
you think
on.
they should be tested offline before they're released to the public? Or do you
They
think
are
the only
offered-
way to test these is to release it to 4 billion people?
Yeah, and reality is that the vast majority of these systems are actually very well tested, but you don't know what you don't know. I think there are many of these cases that have been called out are very edge cases. It's not the vast majority of data, and that is the challenge. And again, I'll go back to medicines. And AI really, by the way, is so far removed in impact from human medicines, right? Medicines are so much more impactful. And medicines that are released go through rigorous testing, but even then there are consequences. We discover them, and then we pull the medicine off the market or restrict its use in specific conditions. So there's a whole body of work to ensure technology, medicines, all of those things are used in the right way in society that we have actually developed over time. Governments have developed regulations. Hospitals have certain practices, best practices. As we adjust to this new technology of AI coming in, we should collectively as a society develop those systems that help us manage the new technology, especially in the areas that truly affect human beings. And so governments should step up to the regulatory responsibility. Universities should educate on that. We should have research groups on that. For example, Microsoft Research has some amazing research on bias in AI that is going on. And so collectively, we will figure out how best to harness this very powerful technology.
And you think there should be some kind of agreement or code that large bodies stick to? How would you like to see that implemented?
I think the European Union, for example, is actually very much in the forefront of that. I mean, the GDPR regulation is a great example, and in fact, Microsoft is a big supporter of these kinds of regulations, because those sort of guideposts need to be established by governments and regulatory bodies, right, without stifling innovation. It is not fair to expect individual companies to know what the right regulation is. You don't want companies regulating the governments or companies regulating society. Instead, our responsibility as a democracy, democratic institutions, is to develop those right rules and regulations. And so Microsoft is in fact a big champion of having the right regulations being developed, and in fact we are happy to participate in them.
Let's talk about the future of work, and it's often talked about that
Right.
As AI comes in and starts being able to do more things, the working world will change. So I do wonder, what sort of work do you see AI being able to do in the next 5, 10, and say 50 years' time? What's the curve look like on the capability of AI?
Well, it'll be very hard to imagine. Look, have you been able to imagine, in 10 years ago that the phones would be as ubiquitous as it is now, for example, that we would touch our phone 150 times a day. The possibilities are vast. One thing that's clearly on the horizon is all perception problems. It's already happening, right? Speech, language, seeing at a distance, being able to talk to other people, and being in virtual reality. Any of those kinds of limitations will, by and large, be lifted in the next few years. And that includes autonomous driving, which I don't think it is immediate future, but in that 10-year time frame, I can see autonomous driving. So you can now look forward to less crowded roads, much more efficient public transportation, much less tax on the ecology of the earth. Because one of the things AI does is it actually creates efficiency with data. It can be used for conservation, it can be used for understanding the destruction of the natural environment. So I think we will be all far less taxing on the planet than ever before as a result. We will understand our world so much better from data. So I think I can see all of those things happening.
What sort of things should today's children be studying in order to work in the world that they will grow into?
Creative work. The sort of things that only humans can truly do. Innovation, right? I mean, really the history of humanity is about leveraging technology, standing on the shoulders of giants, and reaching for something new. Look, I mean, most of the jobs that exist today never existed before. The vast majority of jobs of today are created by technology. So we don't have windmill power and farming the old way. Instead, we have mechanized everything. It'll be the same thing. So, but then you growing up in this world, you're going to be developing on top of this kind of technology, on top of creativity empowered by mobile phones, on top of creativity empowered by the cloud, on top of the creativity empowered by AI running in the cloud, on top of self-driving cars. What new business models could you potentially do if you had the freedom from driving? And you leverage that technology. And not just for cars, but buses, trains, planes, what have you, or fishing. Fishing boats could be automated. And even conservation of the planet could be, farming perhaps. But assume that is not about, don't think of these as displacing or destroying jobs. Instead, they are freeing you up to use that technology and do some things that are much greater, with much greater scale. And you still, as a young person, still have incredible brain power and muscle power and things you can do. You can leverage all of this to create economic opportunity.
What kind of skills do you ask of your AI technicians that join Microsoft right now?
I think really it is a deep understanding of how to set up an AI problem. How do you take a specific situation? What is the right way to collect the data? How do you avoid bias in the data? How do you set the data? How do you set the training problem up? How do you actually make sure that the AI so developed works in unseen situations? How do you combine that with software to develop a service and an application? How would you test that application? A/B test application, meaning with an existing thing, control testing. How would you then deploy it? How do you then monitor it? See that it's working, manage it well. These are the kind of things I want to know.
It was interesting where you said you call it machine learning, not artificial intelligence. So someone once said to me, intelligence is what we use when we don't know what to do. And I think that's the best description of intelligence I've ever heard.
And my favorite definition of artificial intelligence is it's the opposite of natural stupidity.
There's plenty of that in the world, isn't there?
Yeah.
But what would you call an artificially intelligent system? Or rather, what is artificial intelligence and what is just data crunching, is just looking at lots of historical data and processing it really quickly and looking smart?
I'm a geek. I think the vast majority of what people build as AI is just data crunching. It is just learning from past data. Now, the only thing that makes it look artificially intelligent is because in the past, when people did data crunching, they did it with structured data, and so it was the domain of statistics. These days, when computer scientists adopted learning from data, they are crunching text and translating it. They're crunching audio input and doing speech recognition. They're crunching images and recognizing things that are in it. So all of that now gives a perception of human-like capability. But it really still is, at the end of the day, data crunching, just different kinds of data. And what happened is, look, in the last 10, 20 years, as mobile phones came and cameras became incredibly cheap and everything, text became digital, like this is not the case, right? So all of this became data. So everything became data. The world became data. And so now, when you do crunching on that, well, then it starts to look very incredibly smart and intelligent. And
so good. Really. You've got pretty high standards. I like that. What would a system have to be able to do for you to say that is actually artificially intelligent?
To be able to do really complex reasoning with it, right? And like humans do, and be able to do so in the face of uncertainty. So our world is throwing up new things we have never seen before, all the time. And what's uniquely human, and not just human, even the smallest ant or every creature, is able to survive in a completely uncertain environment and do things like one-shot learning, instant learning. I have to see a thing only one time, and I know what it is, and I know how to react to it. And even the smallest of living things seem to know how to react to things they encounter. And that is the kind of thing that I want to see.
Do we have anything like that yet?
No. I don't think we have even achieved the abilities of an ant. I mean, we have the computational power to simulate the equivalent of their neural systems, but we haven't figured out how an ant navigates in the world and really survives in an uncertain environment and reacts to all kinds of stimuli. And the other thing about AI that is very comforting to me is it doesn't have a survival instinct, right?
Well, if you program it to have a survival instinct, then
but
it will.
how do you even define a survival instinct?
Don't do
so we
anything
don't
that
even
will
know.
harm you.
Well, how do you define that in a programmatic fashion, in a software? So I think, look, humans and creatures that live on a planet have evolved over billions of years, and not through teaching, not through schools of AI. They've evolved in a very variable world. And that's led to intelligence. Even the smallest creatures have intelligence. I think when I see something like that starting to emerge, maybe then I'll start believing in the specter of artificial intelligence. Until then, it's just software. Until then, it's just machine learning.
What is your job title?
It is called the CTO of AI. I know.
Okay.
Good
so your
question.
department doesn't exist yet,
Right.
or shouldn't exist.
But well, it is. That word became very popular, unfortunately, and but I think we should all be treating these things as what it truly is. It is software technology, and that's good for everyone. I mean, it's the reality.
Do you think we will get there? Do you think we will get to a stage where you say, yes, that is actually intelligent, that does have the complexity of something that's evolved over millions of years?
I think with the amazing innovations in computing power, it is possible, but you'll have to first transcend some limitations. I mean, it's possible that when quantum computing comes about, true quantum computing that allows you to program, we may have the computational power to get to this level. And then there might be auto AI, meaning systems that can set up AI automatically itself. Or, it's not, right now machine learning systems require a programmer to set up the machine learning system, but there might be even a meta system layers on top that enable evolution of that system. So
AI creating more AI.
Yeah, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, now there's lots of people that are getting nervous out there.
But
So.
those are distant possibilities. Yeah. I mean, I would be surprised if those things happen in our lifetime.
Consciousness.
Right.
I know I'm conscious.
You are self-aware.
But I don't know whether you're conscious or you're just a machine, and whether these guys are just machines and I'm the only thing conscious.
Now I'm worried.
But you're probably thinking the same, really. I wonder whether you think that a computer could ever achieve consciousness if it was complicated enough, or whether consciousness is just something outside of technology.
There are famous neuroscientists, Francis Crick even, who studied consciousness and tried to understand what he called the neural correlates of consciousness. What in the brain really correlates to consciousness, and what does that mean? I think it is a true mystery. This is the amazing thing about our brain, which is, look, almost every other science, physics, going back to the origin of the universe and the Big Bang, we have a first order understanding. We actually have equations that can describe the universe's evolution. We know how cells behave in our body. We know how they reproduce. We know how babies come about. We know genetics and so on. We have a first order understanding of almost everything but how the brain works. We have almost a first order understanding of everything but true intelligence and consciousness. So this is the biggest unsolved problem in science, really. We don't know the dynamics of neurons when they come about in the brain, how it gives rise to behavior and reasoning and awareness and consciousness and emotion. We can describe the individual neural cell, we can describe their impulses, we can describe even some networks of it, we can describe our retina, but when it comes to the brain, we don't know. We don't have a first order understanding.
How did this
the biggest mystery?
Stardust it's suddenly become self-aware and start looking out through my eyes? I mean,
a few pounds of matter, the size of two fists, really. What is it doing? And that is the biggest mystery of our time.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.